My name is Sarah Chen, and I am 28 years old. I teach English at Riverside High School in a small town called Meadowville. This is the story of how my life changed completely in 1 year. It is a story about love, mistakes, difficult choices, and learning what is truly right. Everything started on a cold Monday morning in September. I was standing in my classroom, preparing for my first class of the new school year. I was wearing my favorite blue dress and felt excited but also nervous. Teaching was my dream, and I loved working with students. The classroom smelled like fresh paint and new books. Outside the window, I could see colorful leaves falling from the trees. The bell rang loudly. Students began walking into my classroom, talking and laughing. They looked so young and full of energy. I smiled and greeted each one. "Good morning. Welcome to English class," I said cheerfully. Then he walked in. His name was Daniel Morrison. He was 17 years old, tall with dark brown hair and bright green eyes. He wore a simple white shirt and jeans. When he smiled at me and said, "Good morning, Miss Chen," I felt something strange in my heart. It was like a small electric shock. I quickly looked away and told myself I was being silly. Daniel sat in the front row. During that first class, I noticed he was very intelligent. He answered every question perfectly. He loved reading and writing. When he talked about books, his eyes became so bright and passionate. I thought, what a wonderful student. The weeks passed quickly. Daniel was always the first student to arrive and the last to leave. He asked me questions about literature, about writings, about life. We talked about Shakespeare, about poetry, about dreams. I enjoyed these conversations so much. He was mature for his age, thoughtful and kind. But he was still my student. I was his teacher. There was a line I could never cross. One rainy afternoon in October, Daniel stayed after class to discuss his essay. We were alone in the classroom. The rain was hitting the windows hard, making loud sounds. He sat beside my desk, showing me his writing. Our hands touched accidentally when he passed me his paper. I felt that strange feeling again, stronger this time. "Miss Chen," he said softly, "I really love your classes. You make me see the world differently." "Thank you, Daniel," I replied, pulling my hand away quickly. "You're a gifted student." "It's not just the teaching," he continued, looking directly into my eyes. "It's you. You're different from anyone I've ever met." My heart started beating very fast. I stood up quickly, my chair making a loud noise. "Daniel, we should focus on your essay," I said, my voice shaking slightly. He looked disappointed but nodded. We discussed his writing for 20 more minutes, but the atmosphere had changed. Something unspoken hung in the air between us. I drove home that evening feeling confused and worried. I lived alone in a small apartment with my cat, Whiskers. I made tea and sat by the window, watching the rain. "This is wrong," I told myself firmly. "He's just a student. These feelings will pass." But they didn't pass. Every day, my feelings grew stronger. I tried to avoid Daniel, but that was impossible. He was in my class every day. I saw him in the hallways. He was always there, always kind, always making my heart race. November came. The weather became colder. One Friday evening, the school organized a book fair in the library. Many students and teachers attended. I was helping organize books when Daniel appeared beside me. "Can I help you, Miss Chen?" he asked. "Sure, thank you," I said, trying to sound professional. We worked together, arranging books on the shelves. We talked about our favorite authors. He told me about his dreams of becoming a writer. I told him about why I became a teacher. Time passed so quickly. When I looked at my watch, it was already 8 o'clock. Almost everyone had left. "I should go," I said. "Wait," Daniel said, touching my arm gently. Sarah, Miss Chen, I need to tell you something. Daniel, please don't. I started. I love you, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. I know it's wrong. I know you're my teacher, but I can't keep it inside anymore. I think about you every moment. You're the most beautiful, intelligent, kind person I've ever known. I felt tears coming to my eyes. Part of me wanted to tell him I had feelings too, but I knew the truth. Daniel, I said, my voice breaking, you're 17. I'm your teacher. This can never happen. What you're feeling, it's not real love. It's admiration, maybe a crush, but it's not love. How can you say that? He asked, pain clear in his voice. You feel something too. I know you do. I see it in your eyes. It doesn't matter what I feel, I said firmly, though my heart was breaking. This is wrong. It's against the rules. It could destroy my career, my reputation. And you're too young. You have your whole life ahead of you. Please, Daniel. We must forget this conversation ever happened. I walked away quickly, leaving him standing alone in the library. I drove home crying, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling more confused than ever in my life. The next weeks were torture. Daniel stopped participating in class. He looked sad and distant. I wanted to talk to him, to comfort him, but I knew I couldn't. I had to maintain the boundary. I had to be strong for both of us. December arrived with snow and cold winds. The school prepared for the winter holidays. I felt exhausted from pretending everything was fine. One evening, my best friend Emma came to visit me. Emma was a lawyer, smart and direct. We sat drinking wine in my living room. Sarah, you look terrible, Emma said honestly. What's wrong? I hadn't told anyone about Daniel, but that night, I was so tired of carrying the secret alone. I told Emma everything. She listened carefully, her face serious. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, she finally said, you need to hear the truth. What you're feeling might seem real, but acting on it would be a disaster. He's a minor. You're in a position of power. If anything happened between you two, you could lose your teaching license, face legal problems, and destroy your entire future. And him? He would be hurt too. This isn't a romance novel. This is real life with real consequences. I know, I whispered. I haven't done anything wrong. I won't. Good, Emma said, squeezing my hand. You're doing the right thing. It's hard, but it's right. Time will help. And you need to consider, maybe you should talk to the principal. Maybe Daniel should be moved to another class. That would hurt him more, I said. Maybe, Emma agreed. But it might be necessary. I thought about Emma's words all night. She was right, I knew. But my heart felt so heavy. The winter holidays came. I didn't see Daniel for 2 weeks. I spent Christmas with my parents in the city. They were retired teachers, kind and loving. I didn't tell them about Daniel. Instead, I listened to their stories and tried to remember why I became a teacher in the first place. I became a teacher to help young people, to guide them, to prepare them for the world, not to fall in love with them. January arrived with new snow and new determination. I returned to school ready to be strong, to maintain boundaries, to do the right thing. But fate had other plans. On the first day back, Daniel wasn't in class. I felt worried. The next day, he wasn't there either. On the third day, I asked another student about him. Haven't you heard, Miss Chen? The girl said. Daniel's mother is in the hospital. She has cancer. It's very serious. My heart broke for him. I knew Daniel's father had died when he was young. His mother was all he had. That evening, I did something I knew was dangerous. I found out which hospital his mother was in, and I went there. I found Daniel sitting alone in the hospital waiting room. He looked exhausted, his eyes red from crying. When he saw me, surprise and hope filled his face. "Miss Chen," he said, standing up. "I heard about your mother," I said gently. "I'm so sorry. How is she?" Daniel's strong facade broke. He started crying. Without thinking, I hugged him. He held me tight, crying on my shoulder. We stayed like that for several minutes. I felt his pain, his fear, his loneliness. "She's dying," he whispered. "The doctors say she has maybe a few weeks." "I'm so sorry, Daniel," I said, my own tears falling. We sat together in that cold, white waiting room for hours. We talked about his mother, about his memories, about his fears. I held his hand. I comforted him. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about rules or boundaries. I was just thinking about this young man who was suffering. The following weeks were difficult. Daniel came to school, but he was like a ghost. His mother was getting worse. I checked on him every day, asking how he was. Other teachers noticed my concern, but they thought I was just being kind. They didn't know about my feelings. In February, on a snowy Tuesday evening, Daniel's mother died. I attended the funeral. The small church was cold and sad. Daniel stood alone beside the coffin, looking lost and broken. After the ceremony, I approached him. "If you need anything, Daniel, please tell me," I said softly. "Thank you, Miss Chen," he said, his voice empty. "You're the only person who really cares." "That's not true," I said. "Many people care about you." "But I only want you," he said, looking into my eyes with such intensity that I had to look away. The next weeks were even harder. Daniel had no other family. He was living with a distant aunt who didn't really care about him. He was alone, grieving, struggling. And I wanted to help him so badly. One evening in March, I was working late at school, grading papers. Someone knocked on my classroom door. It was Daniel. "Daniel? What are you doing here so late?" I asked. "I needed to see you," he said, closing the door behind him. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. I can't pretend. I love you. I need you. I'm so alone." He walked toward me. I stood up, my heart racing. "Daniel, please," I said. "This is still wrong. I know you're hurting. I know you're lonely. But—" "I'm not a child," he said angrily. "I'm 17, almost 18. I know my own feelings. And you feel the same way. I know you do." He was right. I did have feelings. But I also knew the truth. "Daniel," I said, my voice shaking, "even if I have feelings, and I'm not saying I do, it doesn't matter. You're my student. There are laws, rules, ethics. If we were together, it would destroy everything. My career would end. You could be hurt. People would judge us harshly. And right now you're grieving. Your emotions are confused. You think you love me, but maybe you're just looking for someone to hold on to because you lost your mother." "Don't psychoanalyze me," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "This isn't about my mother. I've loved you since September, before any of this happened." "You're 17, I said firmly. "In a few months, you'll graduate and go to college. You'll meet other people. You'll realize this was just a phase, just—" "Stop," he interrupted. "Stop telling me what I feel isn't real." We stood there, facing each other, both breathing hard, both emotional. The tension in the room was unbearable. Then Daniel did something unexpected. He kissed me. For one brief second, I kissed him back. His lips were soft and warm. I felt everything I'd been suppressing for months. It was beautiful and terrifying and wrong all at once. Then reality hit me like cold water. I pushed him away firmly. No, I said loudly. No, Daniel. This is wrong. You need to leave.
Now.
Daniel looked shocked, then hurt, then angry. I can't believe you, he said. You kissed me back. You felt it too. It was a mistake, I said, though tears were streaming down my face. A terrible mistake. Please go. And we can never speak of this again. Daniel stared at me for a long moment, his eyes full of pain and anger. Then he turned and left, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed into my chair, crying harder than I'd ever cried in my life. What had I done? I had let my guard down for 1 second, and now everything was more complicated. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about calling Emma, but I was too ashamed. I had crossed the line, even if only for a moment. I had kissed my student. I felt disgusted with myself. The next day at school was horrible. Daniel didn't come to class. I was worried and guilty. Had I hurt him even more? After school, I went to the principal's office. Mrs. Rodriguez was a kind woman in her 50s with gray hair and wise eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez, I said nervously, I need to talk to you about something. Of course, Sarah. What's wrong? She asked, concerned. I took a deep breath. I think Daniel Morrison should be moved to another English class.
Why?
Mrs. Rodriguez asked, surprised. I thought he was one of your best students. He is, I said carefully. But there's been some inappropriate behavior. He's developed feelings for me. He told me he loves me. Last night, he tried to kiss me. It was partly true. I didn't mention that I had kissed him back. Mrs. Rodriguez's face became very serious. Did anything happen, Sarah? Tell me honestly. No, I lied. I stopped it immediately. But I think it's best if he's in another class. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded slowly. You did the right thing telling me. Yes, we'll move him. And Sarah, be careful. These situations can become very complicated. If the student or anyone else tells a different story, it could be very bad for you. I understand, I said, feeling cold fear in my stomach. Daniel was moved to Mr. Patterson's English class the next week. I didn't see him anymore, except sometimes in the hallways. When our eyes met, his look was full of pain and betrayal. Each time, I felt like a knife was cutting my heart. April came with rain and flowers. I tried to focus on my other students, on my teaching, on moving forward. But I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Was I wrong? Had I hurt him unnecessarily? But no, I had done the right thing. The only thing. One rainy afternoon, Emma came to visit me again. You look better, she observed. I feel a little better, I admitted. Time is helping. Good, Emma said. You made the right choice, Sarah. It was hard, but it was right. Was it? I asked. I keep thinking, what if we had waited? What if, when he turned 18 and graduated, we had started dating then? Would that have been so wrong? Emma looked at me seriously. Honestly, it still would have been problematic. The power dynamic doesn't disappear just because he graduates. You were his teacher. That relationship will always be there. And people will always question whether something inappropriate happened while he was your student, which, let's be honest, something did. That one kiss, even though you stopped it, crossed the line. I know, I whispered. I hate myself for that moment. Don't hate yourself, Emma said gently. You're human. You had feelings. But you stopped it. You did the right thing in the end. That's what matters. May arrived with sunshine and warmth. The school year was ending. Students were preparing for final exams. I heard that Daniel had been accepted to a good university in another state. He would be leaving in August.
Part of me was relieved.
Part of me was heartbroken. On the last day of school in June, I was packing up my classroom. Most students had already left for summer vacation. I was alone, putting books in boxes, when someone knocked on the door. It was Daniel. He looked different. Older somehow. Taller. More mature. "Miss Chen," he said formally. "May I talk to you?" "Of course," I said, my heart beating fast. He walked in and closed the door. We stood facing each other, exactly as we had done so many times before. "I came to say goodbye," Daniel said. "And to apologize." "Apologize?" I said, surprised. "Daniel, you don't need to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "I've been thinking a lot these past months. About everything that happened. About my mother's death. About my feelings for you. About that kiss." I felt my face turn red at the mention of the kiss. "I was wrong," Daniel continued. "Not wrong about my feelings, those were real. But wrong about putting you in that position. You were my teacher. You were trying to help me when my mother died.
And I
confused gratitude and admiration and loneliness with love. Or maybe it was love, but the wrong kind of love. The kind that asks too much, that doesn't think about consequences." I felt tears coming to my eyes. "Daniel, Let me finish," he said. "I'm going to university in August. I'm going to study literature, become a writer, live my life. And I want to thank you. You were the best teacher I ever had. You taught me about books, about writing, about thinking. But you also taught me about integrity, about doing what's right even when it's hard. You could have taken advantage of my feelings. You could have made a terrible mistake. But you didn't. You protected both of us. And I'm grateful for that." Now I was definitely crying. "Daniel," I said, my voice shaking, "you're an amazing person. You're going to do wonderful things with your life. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you, Miss Chen," he said, smiling sadly. "Maybe in another life, in different circumstances, things could have been different. But in this life, you were my teacher, and I was your student. And you taught me the most important lesson of all, that love sometimes means saying no." He walked toward me and extended his hand. I shook it, feeling the warmth of his touch one last time. "Goodbye, Miss Chen," he said. "Goodbye, Daniel," I whispered. "Good luck with everything." He smiled one last time, then turned and walked out of my classroom. I stood there alone, crying silently, knowing I had done the right thing but still feeling the pain of loss. Summer passed slowly. I spent time with my family, read books, traveled a little. I thought about Daniel often, but the pain gradually became less sharp. Emma was right, time was helping. In September, a new school year began. New students, new faces, new possibilities. I stood in my classroom on that first Monday morning, exactly 1 year after Daniel had walked into my life. I was wearing my favorite blue dress again. The room smelled like fresh paint and new books. Outside the window, colorful leaves were falling from the trees. The bell rang. Students began walking in. I smiled and greeted each one. "Good morning. Welcome to English class." This time, I felt different. Stronger. Wiser. Sadder, but also more at peace. I had loved my student. It was wrong, but it was real. And I had made the right choice. I had protected him, protected myself, protected the integrity of teaching. It had hurt terribly, but it had been right. That evening, I received an email. It was from Daniel. My heart jumped when I saw his name. "Dear Miss Chen," the email said. "I'm writing from university. I wanted you to know that I'm doing well. I'm enjoying my classes, making friends, and writing every day. I'm also seeing a therapist talking about my mother's death and everything else. It's helping a lot. You were right about so much. My feelings for you were real, but they were also complicated by grief and loneliness and the fact that you were the first person who really saw me. I understand now that the love I felt, while genuine, wasn't the kind of love that should lead to a relationship. It was admiration, gratitude, and a need for connection during a terrible time. Thank you for being strong when I couldn't be. Thank you for protecting me from a mistake that would have hurt us both. You'll always be important to me, but in the right way, as the teacher who changed my life. With respect and gratitude, Daniel. I read the email 3 times, tears streaming down my face. But these were different tears. Not tears of pain, but tears of relief and peace. I wrote back, Dear Daniel, thank you for your email. I'm so happy to hear you're doing well. You're going to have a wonderful life. Never forget how talented and special you are. Keep writing, keep growing, keep being the amazing person you are. You'll always be in my thoughts as one of the best students I ever had. With warm wishes, Sarah Chen. I pressed send, then closed my laptop. Whiskers jumped onto my lap, purring softly. I stroked his soft fur and looked out the window at the dark sky. I had loved my student. It was wrong, but it happened. And we had survived it. We had both done the right thing in the end. Now it was time to move forward. To be the teacher I was meant to be. To help students without crossing boundaries. To keep my heart open, but my mind clear. Love is complicated. Sometimes love means saying yes. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes the greatest act of love is walking away. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I learned it well, and I would never forget it. Now that you've seen the whole story, we would really appreciate it if you rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your thoughts help us improve and make sure we bring you the kind of stories you truly enjoy.